yeah, so the bit of Dharma that I was going to talk about, and I think we'll just mention it now, and then we will spend a sort of bit more time after lunch on this as well. Was these things called the 3 marks of existence? This is proper Buddhist Dharma now, and they are, so it's these qualities of our existence that the Buddha taught, and they are impermanent, so that everything is impermanent. Everything is suffering, and everything is not self, cannot be seen to be me or mine. And I suppose why I thought of bringing them in this sort of theme of what matters, what is the heart of what matters, is that if we spend our whole life, which we do, and again it's this sensitivity, it's not saying it's wrong, but we obviously spend most of our life, that's the phrase I thought I quite liked, yeah, we spend most of our lives making our lives as stable as possible, as comfortable as possible, and as sort of fine as possible, you know. And we wouldn't be here, I wouldn't have, you know, these clothes, and I wouldn't have, you know, food and all that thing, if there wasn't an element of that in our lives. And so it is this just really reflecting on, and what I'll do after lunch is I'm going to just really reflect on one of the Buddha's teachings around this in a sutta, and I'll sort of describe it and what I'm getting out of that. But so it was a sort of key teaching of that. He recognized that actually if you think the world is stable, and the world is comfortable, and the world is mine, actually you're going to suffer. And the whole, you know, the story of, and I'll go more is, you know, that he was a prince and he lived in a palace, and it had walls that he wasn't let out of. So he was sort of almost like enclosed in this palace, and he had everything you've got, so it was as stable as you could possibly manage. It was as comfortable as you could possibly, you know, beyond all our imaginings of what's comfortable. And it was, they were the king and he was the prince, the son of the king, and so it was theirs. Not only was the palace theirs, but the country was theirs, and all the people were theirs. So it was the absolute symbol of stability, comfort, and possession, or it's mine, it's mine. And he then managed to get out of this palace, and this is so well known, I'm sure, but we all like the story, you know, you can say it. But I find it interesting, you know, even thinking about it again, was that, think of it as a metaphor, not just as a reality, a metaphor. You know, he comes out of the palace, and he sees that there is sickness, there is illness, there is death, and he is shocked. There's this absolute shock. And so I thought we'll just stay with that bit of it before lunch, is that shock. And we all experience those shocks. So I suppose, you know, let's take impermanence as the first one. And in some ways it's the most shocking. That we are going to die. Everything here is not going to be here as it is in many years, who knows? I was listening to someone teach on this, and they said, we drink the water that's in our system, so we're drinking all the time. Water, I don't know, it's 90% of us or something. But the water in our system is recycled, as it were, I can't remember, every 7 days or something, or every 3 days or something like that. So all the water, so if you go on holiday and you're in France, then within 3 days you're full of French water. And it was, this sort of thing. So you're saying, we're on retreat and we've been here for 3 days, so now you're full of the water here. So we're all full of the same water. So those reflections are really, so I'm sort of like dropping them in so that you can sort of spend a bit of time over lunch. Just those sort of reflections. It's like very simple at some level. It's like, yeah, of course. Well, of course. I know that. And we don't know it in detail, but we know it. So that was quite interesting when she said that, so like, I haven't really thought about that. Or, the fact that our whole body, and she was saying again in more detail around how our whole body is the cells in our body change within a certain amount of time. She said organs are different. They now know that the liver actually reconstitutes itself within a very short amount of time. It was a ridiculous short time, like a week or something. Every week we've got a different liver, but we haven't, and this is one of the mysteries of science, is how do all the cells change and yet stay the same? And that's the mystery of Dharma. How do all of this change every minute? How am I the same person I was when I was 3? I still feel I'm the same person. How does that happen? Anyway, that's a big question. But, so at one level it's very ordinary. And you could say that's the first level of being aware, is like, actually, that's true. So what am I to do about that? And then you could say, well, so long as you're aware of it, then you might act more appropriately. So when your car, you have an accident and your car gets smashed, you don't overboard in going, oh my God, because you think, everything's imperfect. And so you can act a bit more appropriately. Now this, I'm afraid, doesn't help me at all. Because I'll still have an absolute hissy fit and we just lost 2 of our cats, and it was the most devastating, and it's still devastating that they're no longer around. But the process of an ill and dying cat in your life, or an ill and dying person, is devastating. It triggers my nervous system to go into major anxiety, which I have to then manage. So it's not a simple thing. Similarly, so there's this impermanence and then suffering. Again, yes, we are all going to suffer in the sense of, through impermanence, we are going to suffer and die. We suffer when anything affects our own system that we don't want. We suffer when, I think Buddha says something like, when we're deprived of what we love, or we're forced to be around what we don't love, which is, I think, usual. To me, definitely. And then we suffer because we resist. There's the suffering of change, I think he talks about, that we're resisting this impermanence. We're suffering because we're going, no, and we do. I do, all the time. And then this not self, that if you really want to grasp onto everything, you'll find that if you really wanted to do this, the exhaustion would be so great that you've done, you would everything goes. And I mean, to me, the most interesting way of, you can think about it's a huge topic. It's not self, and it's got huge Buddhist-y ramifications. But you can even think about it in terms of, and I'll be going through this afternoon, just in meditation. Where did that thought come from? Is it my thought? Did I think that thought? Because I have no idea where that came from. Some images, I'm getting more sensitive to images that just appear, like especially as you're slightly becoming sleepy. And there are things that I cannot say I could possibly have imagined. There are things I don't even know about. And these images come into my head. They're strong, So are they mine? So even at that level, and the Buddhist, as I'll talk about this afternoon, he says, if you had power over, like him in his palace in a way, have you got power over your thought? And I say, no, I haven't. Have you got power over your body? No. Have you got power over even your perceptions? Not really, because, science knows more about that now. Our perceptions fool us. We create the world that we see around us. So at one level, that's all around. So is that all saying to us, life is, as I said at the beginning, suffering, impermanent, it's not even mine. So what's the point? And it is this sort of like, how do you make meaning out of that? Now, I'm going to leave that with you. We're coming up to lunch.
Lunch, that's the meaning, isn't it, Sheila? Lunch is the meaning.
But I can only say that I'm going to talk about this sutta of the Buddha, because I sort of thought, I've got to read one of these, because I've got to find out, well, what did he actually say? How did he say this? You can find meaning in this. Because obviously, the Buddha, his teaching, at one point is summarized in all that arises ceases. That's a summary of the Buddha's teaching. All that arises ceases. And you can sort of say, oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. That really is, I really needed to know that. All that arises ceases, yeah. So why is that? And it says where that comes in the sutta. It said, the world shook when he said that. The world shook. And it was like, yeah, but why? So how does the Buddha get us to say that just doesn't mean, oh, right, there you go. Or coming and going, it's definitely suffering. None of us in this room would say it's not suffering. And it's not even mine. So what's the point? So I leave you with those things. And let's hope that something that, I was very intrigued when I read how the Buddha got us through that. And we will do that after that. Thank you very much.
It's a good way